Welcome back to the channel, this tactical intellectual channel. This is part 3, Black Danes and Vikings. So just a heads up and a disclaimer. Part 4 will not be Black Danes and Vikings, but it will be called Part 4, Melanated Danes and Vikings. That's just me being respectful towards the people that came before us right there. So yeah, this part 3. We have some very interesting information, and we're gonna go over a little bit of the skeletal remains, but then the prime topic will be in regards to the customs, the traditions, the material culture that they left behind. We're gonna delve into that and get some more confirmation on who these people really were. So usually when I make these video presentations, my method is to present things point by point, layer by layer, come full circle with things so that I cover all the bases. Now for today, I'm getting straight to the point. There won't be too much reading or too much building. So let's go ahead and start. Okay, so the book is Environment, Race, and Migration. The author is Griffith Taylor. The page is 163. The topic is the first Neolithic people to enter into Europe from the north. So check this out. They have been reasonably classified as the first Nordic folks to enter Europe. One school of ethnologists, however, thinks that the Nordic peoples are a mixture of Mediterraneans and later Asiatic peoples, while another believes that they were merely bleached Mediterranean peoples. Okay, it says we may here also refer briefly to the Ainu of North Japan as primitive members of the same migration zone, characterized by the same abundance of hair and the same cephalic index as the Nordics. Should this be supported? Yeah, I should support it. Let's go to Roland B. Dixon's book, Racial History of Man, and let's go to page 102. The highlighted portion in orange reads, later these newer types, and particularly the latter themselves, made their way into these northern lands and forests, and there in relative isolation and little disturbed by the streams of Paleo, Alpine, and Alpine immigrants who revolutionized conditions in Central and Western Europe. These dolichocephalic factors amalgamated to produce that blend in the main of Caspian and Mediterranean types, which has come to be called the Nordic race. 103, highlighted portion in orange reads, the point of view adopted in the present study, the Nordic race is primarily a blend of two radically different types, which it is believed developed locally in the Baltic lands during the Neolithic and early Metal stages or ages. Let's go back to page 102. All right, so that yellow highlighted portion right above the part that I just read not too long ago, it says, into this region along the Baltic had come in early Neolithic times remnants of the Paleolithic proto-Australoids and proto-Negroids of France and southern Germany, displaced by the incoming Mediterranean and Caspian peoples from the south and east. Come on, man, it's self-explanatory right there. In order to have a blend, you have to have the entities separate first. And in order to have 4, you need 2 right here and 2 right there. So there's definitely a population of the single entities before they mixed and amalgamated. We know this. Just think of London, think of New York, think of Miami. To have all these mixtures of people, there's going to be a large proportion of the single entity. In order to have a bunch of Creoles, you need white people and black people. In order to have Blasians, you need black people and Asians. Come on, man. It's not hard. So let's move on. Here I have a slide that says Nordics are a mixture of different types. Now, I'm going to support what I say, and we're going to turn our attention to and examine the book, The Racial History of Man. We are on page 74. It says Scandinavia, Denmark, Sweden, and Norway. So what you see in the yellow highlighted portion is a set of Danish skulls and a set of Swedish skulls, both of the same period. Now, they were found in megalithic graves. Now, the compare and contrast is this right here. The Danish has a slight majority of dolichocephalic factors. So Paleoalpine and then the Caspian next up in prevalence is showing. Then when you go to the Swedish and compare it, the Swedish collection of skulls has, majority dolichocephalic, and then the Caspian, Alpine, and Mediterranean types are all balanced, as it says right there. So let's go to page 75. They are comparing the Danish and Swedish skulls found to the German ones. So on page 75, you see that it says that it differs moreover from both the Danish and Swedish series, that's the German ones, because they are composed primarily of Proto-Australoid and Proto-Negro factors. Page 75, the first full paragraph, that is dealing with the Neolithic era. I'm not going to deal with that right now, but I will address that in the broader European part 3 video presentation. Now towards the bottom on the second paragraph, that is the Iron Age era. So it's talking about a contrast or kind of a shift. You see in Denmark, it's saying that the Paleoalpine element nearly disappeared, and then a large increase in the proportions of Caspian and Mediterranean types happened. So the result is that the population in the Iron Age contrasted from the Neolithic times, primarily dolichocephalic. Now check this out here. It's talking about in eastern Sweden. It says that the former strong factors of Mediterranean and Alpine types have largely decreased and been replaced by Proto-Negroid and Proto-Australoid elements, which previously had but slight representation in Sweden. It's dropped down. The very meager data for eastern Norway, which are the earliest we have as yet for this country, indicate that these same Proto-Australoid and Proto-Negroid elements were also in the majority there. On page 77, we are again in Norway, and this time the cranial samples are from the medieval period, and as you can see, there's a lot of Proto-Australoid types that are found. That of course is in the first paragraph. Now I will go in depth in other videos, but not this one. The second paragraph there is talking about the Proto-Australoid not being the main element found when it comes to dolichocephalic groups of people or skulls, but it's instead the Mediterranean type. Now, of course, it says that the brachycephalic elements are the Alpine and Mongoloid, and they're of equal importance. Now, that last piece of information on the bottom of page 77 is pretty interesting because it mentions how the also crania would represent the later wave of people from Sweden who brought that Proto-Australoid factor into Norway. So, I mean, that's pretty dope information there. Let's go ahead and move forward. So on page 79, the entire page basically deals with the physical description of these Nordic peoples. Now, I know you guys see the pigmentation, the blonde, and the brunette and everything, but there's a lot of factors missing in this equation because, folks today, we're looking at it through a present day lens. So we see, the finished product right now when it comes to Scandinavia, but I'm dealing with what led up to that because it wasn't always like that. It wasn't like that in the Paleolithic, the Neolithic, the Metal Ages, the medieval times. So, I mean, it's a lot to it. Basically, I wanted to present pieces of facts and evidence before I really touch on this part here. But let's go ahead and move on to the last paragraph. And it says, we can only guess that the tall, blonde, dolichocephalic group, the typical Nordic stratum, is here as in northern Germany, a blend primarily between the Mediterranean and the Caspian types. And then on page 80, we have an acknowledgement that brachycephalic element, they're all mixture, they're derived from several different sources. So I'll handle that later. So let's go ahead and move forward. So we are still on the topic of the Nordics right here. So we go to page 182 of Environment, Race, and Migration. And the highlighted portion is talking about what Dixon thinks regarding the Nordics. And it says, Dixon thinks that the Nordic race is primarily a mixture of groups 2 and 3, as given in the adjoining table. The writer, as stated, believes that the Nordic is a bleached Mediterranean who moved westward, like the latter, from Central Asia, but by the cold northern route. Then let's drop down, okay, to the bottom portion, and it says, thus the Teutonic or Nordic type of the other ethnologists is stated by Dixon to be an ancient blend of Mediterranean, Caspian, and Proto-Negroid types. So as you can see, when you cross-reference with page 79 of The Racial History of Man by Dixon, everything pairs well nicely, man. You know, some people have a problem when you cross-reference. You know, they think you cherry picking, but nah, that's what all real researchers do. So I turn my attention back to the slide here, and the second bullet point says Griffith Taylor speaks on how the Toda people may be akin to an early form of the Nordic race. And obviously what I use to support that is found in Environment, Race, and Migration, and page 210 speaks on that. Let's see what it says. You know, I find it interesting that the detractors, instead of saying, hey, you don't know what you're talking about, they know that I have the sources, so now they're saying, you're misrepresenting what is being said and you're cherry picking. I've been getting that a lot lately, but I digress, man. In some weird way, you can say that progress is being made with these people, but who knows with them, man. They're weird. All right, so let's go ahead and go into page 210. So this is getting in territory that I haven't even set up yet already, because it's talking about the Aryan invasion, or the speakers who spoke Aryan invading this area right here. But let's go ahead and drop down, and we're going to start where it says a very interesting tribe is the Toda people of the Nilgiri Hills. They are characterized by their hairy appearance, thus resembling the Ainu and the Australian. Indeed, they may be akin to an early form of the Nordic race. So we're just throwing that out there. This is what your boy Griffith Taylor is saying. So let's keep that in mind. Can I back it up? Yeah, certainly, or else I wouldn't even mention it. But that's interesting right there. Now let's go ahead and see what these people look like. So let's check this video out for the visual, and the link to this specific video will be in the description.
Dans les monts Nilgiri, à 2400 mètres d'altitude, nous avons rencontré une société idéale, la tribu des Todas. Les Todas ne sont plus aujourd'hui que 800. Depuis le fond des siècles, ils habitent ces montagnes isolées où personne n'était venu troubler leur solitude jusqu'à l'arrivée des Anglais. Certains ethnologues les croient d'origine sumérienne. On dit aussi qu'ils descendent des soldats d'Alexandre. Eux, les Todas, pensent qu'un jour leur déesse mère a donné un coup de baguette. De la rivière sont sortis des buffles magnifiques. À la queue du dernier buffle était suspendu un Toda. Dès l'âge de 13 ans, aucune jeune fille Toda n'est plus vierge. Avant la puberté, on les confie à un homme expérimenté qui leur apprend l'amour physique. Cet enseignement fait partie de leur éducation, au même titre que le chant ou la cuisine. Le sexe est un besoin naturel, et toute leur vie, les Todas pratiquent l'amour libre. Dans la langue Toda, le mot sexe n'existe pas. Ils utilisent les mots fruits ou nourriture. Les maisons des Todas sont en bois. Les portes sont toujours au ras du sol. Divisés en 16 clans, les Todas sont éparpillés sur leur vaste territoire en hameaux de quelques maisons. Le mariage est fixé dès la naissance, mais comme les femmes sont moins nombreuses que les hommes, L'usage pour une jeune fille Toda est d'épouser à la fois plusieurs frères d'une même famille. Comme par ailleurs la liberté sexuelle est absolue dans toute la tribu, la paternité des enfants est impossible à établir. C'est le frère aîné qui est le père légal. Tribu pastorale, les Todas n'ont jamais voulu pratiquer l'agriculture. Ils sont végétariens et se nourrissent essentiellement du lait de leurs buffles, de miel et de fruits sauvages, et de céréales que leur fournissent les tribus voisines à qui ils laissent une partie de leur terre pour cultiver. Le sol appartient à la communauté et ne peut être vendu. Les Todas n'ont jamais fait la guerre, jamais porté d'armes. Ils n'ont pas de loi, pas de chef, pas de hiérarchie. Si jamais un différend grave éclate entre deux Todas, il est réglé par un conseil d'anciens improvisé pour la circonstance. Les buffles des Todas sont une espèce à longue corne, unique en Inde. Ils sont sacrés et constituent la seule activité et la seule richesse de la tribu. Les Todas considèrent tous les autres animaux comme impurs. Les hommes sont prêtres à tour de rôle pendant 1 an. Le prêtre vit seul dans l'enceinte du temple, personne ne peut l'approcher ou le toucher, et il doit rester chaste. Chaque temple contient une pièce de métal sacré, le monis, qui est la relique du clan.
So I'm going to take some time to make a point regarding the Toda peoples. Recently, I did a video presentation on the original peoples of Russia. The informational highlight of that part 1 presentation was found in the book, The Racial History of Man, page 243. Let me go ahead and put the image of that page on the screen here. So here's the main point. Time period wise, the Neolithic period in Europe. What's the geography? Well, from India to Kamchatka, Russia. What's the people? Okay, it seems to have been occupied in the main by a dolichocephalic, dark-skinned Negroid population, which was a blend in varying proportions to the Proto-Australoid and Proto-Negro peoples. The Proto-Australoid people, or the Australo-Negroes, are fairly similar to the conventional image of the regular Negro, aside from hair texture. They're both similar to one another aside from hair texture. So on this platform, I include the Australo peoples as Negroes. I just call them Australo Negroes, or the straight haired Negro. So with that in mind, let me go back to the book Environment, Race, and Migration and address some information taken from pages 210 and 211. As you can see, it's talking about the Aryan speakers invaded the area around 2000 BC and were opposed by the primitive Veda Australo Negroes. And it goes to tell you that they were short, dark skin, broad noses. And then further down below, this was the main point. This page had information linking these Toda people to the earliest Nordic peoples. That's why I am speaking about them in the first place. Page 211 is just an enlarged map of the Indian subcontinent, and it's highlighting the races of India right there. Then below that, when you do go to the paragraph, it's speaking about another invasion, but I want to properly introduce pieces of information so you guys can follow where I'm coming from, as opposed to making statements and backtracking and trying to explain my stance on said statements. Now, I have a slide that says the Toda people. Nothing concrete, just throwing the possibility out there. What do I mean by that? Well, my last point, instead of being 100% my stance is right, I don't care what you think. No, I'm saying I think that the chances are very, very high that the Toda tribe were much darker in complexion, and they probably had some different type of features, off by, well, tone it down by 2 or 3 degrees. Now, the ones that you saw in the video, I mean, these are modern day Toda people, so you gotta remember, man, these peoples in the video, that's what you saw after centuries of mixtures. Now bring up the fact that there was an invasion or two, and you see where I'm coming from with this. So just as in early Kamchatka, Russia, and the rest of Russia and Asia, the early peoples or the first peoples in Scandinavia were this type of mixture. What I mean by this type of mixture, well, the Australo Negroes and various other types of Negroes. Straight-haired Negroes, Australo Negroes, and coarse-haired Negroes is what you think of, the conventional image that you think of when you hear Negro. But there are many types of coarse-haired Negroes out there. So there's that blend also. So you had Australos, the regulars, many types of regulars, and then that blend of the two all over Europe. I mean, think about it. If it's in Russia, then Germany, Scandinavia, elsewhere, Eastern Europe, that's nothing. That's a layup when it comes to making my point. So that will conclude this video presentation here. And remember, I will name change this series. Instead of Black Danes and Vikings Part 4, it's going to be, something more dignified, more original, the original Scandinavians Part 4. I'll figure it out. I'll come up with something good. No stress here. Anyway, you guys take care, and I'll see you guys later.